from the top of West Mountain in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Good morning, everybody. This is 94.3 FM, The Talker. This is Sanity Check, and it is the fastest hour in radio, for sure. I am Libertarian Lou. Here we go. We got Tea Party Mike on the phone. In studio today is Frank Sorick from Wilkes-Barre. Good morning, Frank. And if you want to start your weekend off right, like always, give us a buzz. And that is 888-577-4487. That number is 888-577-4487. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. I know everybody's excited there, and I'm happy to hear that you'll be covering things today and making sure that Wilkes-Barre is on the top of corruption. And that's always very exciting. Nothing has changed. And someone asked me the other day where you're from. I said, born and raised in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And they said, "Where is that?" I said, "Just wait long enough. You'll figure it out."
It'll be in the news again, Michael.
It'll be in the news again. Absolutely.
And that's what we're hearing here. We are about to be front page news, and that's why Frank is here. And we're going to follow up a little bit more about what we talked about last week about tying this all together. Why having a free and independent press is so important. Why having free and equal elections is so important, and how we could actually make the changes that we need to change to see. To take our government back, to take our neighborhoods back. Forget about the government or just our local neighborhoods, Frank.
Right. It is very important. I mean, you have the local medias, and they're doing a pretty decent job in keeping us informed in certain things. But the idea of having another news source who can dig a little bit deeper, and that's what the Gazette is doing. We're digging deeper into the stories.
Michael, last week we ended with just talking about. Actually, Frank, and you weren't here last week, but we were praising the work that you have done, the work that Mark Robbins have done, and staying on it and digging and digging and digging. And the stuff that's going to be coming out with lag towing and this whole idea of this predatory towing thing and how it's all, all the tentacles, with the police force, with the administrations are all tied together. And the reason it stayed front and center, and the reason why what we're hearing about all these indictments that are going to be coming out, we think maybe as early as Tuesday, and that's some of the reports that Michael, that Frank has. But I got to tell you, oh my God, what an issue that John D. has put together here for those. John D. Liberto is our editor and chief cook and bottle washer and everything else, right, Michael? I was thinking about this morning. I was going to throw John on, but the thing is that. It's just not the editing. I was thinking, what do other editors do? Do they go out and distribute the papers, and they go out and get ads? And folks, for those that might be listening for the first time, and certainly for those that have listened to us right from the start, we do everything. I mean, right. It's one big team, Michael, and he sent me a snapshot of the Wilkes-Barre Independent Gazette. Coming up this Monday. It's coming out Monday. The Wilkes-Barre Gazette edition's coming out. And what an edition. I got to tell you, not only you have our locals that are writing some unbelievable stories. Betty Rock and Candy, Mark Robbins, Antonello is in there. And that didn't even include yet X's article on Syria and the false flags and Frank, all your stories, which is what we're going to talk about today on the radio here. And we got gag orders. And I mean, I got to tell you, this is going to be one blockbuster of a paper coming out Monday.
We say every single month, this is the best paper we've ever done. Every month it gets better and better. So if you're just picking up the Gazette now, boy, are you in for a treat.
It is. Michael, I got to tell you, man, it's definitely going to be rocking here, that's for sure. So some of this...
I really want to thank the kings and queens of Wilkes-Barre to give us all this material.
Oh, you're setting us up. You just threw us a softball, Michael. The kings and queens have been revisited.
They have. Well, the kings and queens work hard at corruption. It is certainly no easy task, spinning the web that they have spun so that we can uncover it like we have.
Yeah, Michael, so anyway, here we go. We got... Frank, you certainly did, and some of the breaking stuff that we're going to talk about today, I really don't think anybody else
They haven't dug as deep. They have. I will give credit where credit is due.
Of course.
The Time Shamrock publication in Wilkes-Barre, the Citizens Voice.
The Shamrock.
Yeah,
With the dollar sign
I
in
know
it.
that pains you, Lou, but they did.
Good.
They put out the list.
A quality piece.
Yeah, they did a quality piece on the credit union and who their board members are. They did inform us of that. But I dug into a little bit deeper of not just the names of the folks, but actually their connection.
Their connections, and that's what will be printed in part on Monday. Michael, my boy, oh boy. My mind is shot already. You see, maybe too much coffee this morning. You listen to Sanity Check. That's why they call it Sanity Check. And if you need to blow off a little steam, that number is 888-577-4487. So anyway, Frank, why don't we tell our listeners a little bit about what Mayor Layton and how this relates to the kings and queens, right, Michael, and who's involved with all of this stuff?
Anybody who has been following this story has heard what the mayor has said, and that is that the credit union has absolutely no affiliation or relationship to city government. It is an independent from city government, and it merely rents space at a rate of $750 a month from City Hall. That's it.
So let me stop you there, Frank, and once again, so people can understand this whole idea, this credit union.
Correct. The Wilkes-Barre City Employees Federal Credit Union serves the employees of city government, the Wilkes-Barre Township government, as well as Plains Township government and their families. That's it. If you are not a family member of an employee of those three governments that I mentioned, you may not join.
So what has happened here in the past 2 weeks or so, the head of the credit union, allegedly, and we're going to say allegedly here, committed suicide. Took his own life. Okay, and in that whole, we're also privy to the fact that they're being looked at. Correct.
Correct. The credit union, the director of the Scranton FBI has stated that the credit union itself has become a not necessarily a target of investigation, but they've been looking at the credit union and subpoenaing their records and statements of their employees.
And if we nibble around the edges a little bit here, Michael, too, is that because we have. Last week, I mentioned that I was called into the FBI, or we sat down with the FBI, and they asked us for some more information, and we're welcoming people, and they're asking for our help and all the media's help to get that information out there to come forward. I could say, and like I said last week, I was very encouraged. In fact, when I first went into the FBI, the first thing I said, and I don't know if I mentioned this last week, was the word on the street, we can't trust you guys either. And they understand that. Right. And they understand that there is a barrier here that people are putting up and saying, wait a minute, who can we trust? I feel comfortable going to them. I'm going to encourage people to give them that information, and because it looks as though that they are digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this.
They absolutely are. They have a new director, Mr. Quinn, who took over there. Awesome gentleman at the Scranton FBI, and they're doing a lot of good work. So definitely we encourage you to contact them if you have any information. So
anyway, so here we now, they're looking at the credit union, and they're saying, wait a minute, what's going on? Now, am I off base when I say that it seems as though there are unsecured loans tied into perhaps lag towing with the cars that all of a sudden... That's what it looks like. And we read recently Mr. Glodzik also made a statement to the press in last week's edition of one of the Wilkes-Barre papers, where he said you can go ahead and check. None of the titles have made it to the credit union. You can look. None of my titles are there. So my cars are not involved. And that's what he said. And I wholeheartedly believe Leo's telling the truth, that none of his titles made it down there. Doesn't mean the cars weren't used as collateral. None of the titles were encumbrance to the credit union. So understand the difference. So, Michael, I think Frank's nibbling around the edges here, too. And one of the reasons we say that, Frank and Michael, not only... We have been a source for information, and Frank, you know as well as I do that there are certain things that we can't talk about only because we are involved with perhaps other investigations, and we will leave it at that. Right. Michael, talking about the kings and queens, Frank, why don't you help us out here a little bit about who are the people that are on the board of this credit union that it seems as though going to be a focal point of what's coming out here perhaps as early as Tuesday. Certainly you've had information that there's going to be some.
Absolutely. Well, again, the credit union that is not related to city government had only 3 employees prior to the credit union manager. Who the credit union manager who allegedly took his own life is married to the assistant city clerk of the city. Now, that in itself, okay, his wife also works for city government. So
you mean Majakis?
No.
Oh, this is a different one.
No. This is the assistant city clerk, not the actual city clerk.
Because they were one of the original kings and queens.
Correct.
But we'll get to that, I'm sure.
We'll get to that. You're jumping the gun here, Lou. And then we have a credit union employee who is a clerk at the credit union, who is the niece of the very same assistant city clerk. So both her husband and niece worked at the credit union. And then we have the third remaining credit union employee who is married to a firefighter. So all three credit union employees married to city employees or related to city employees. So there you have that tie. And then we go on to
and what did Mayor Layton say again?
They're not related. The credit union is independent from city government. It's not related in any way.
But go ahead. I don't want to cut you off here.
So now we go on to the board members. And just in the board, and you'll have to check out the Independent Gazette for a full list, but just going to give you a quick recap here so we don't take up the entire hour. We have 4 former city firefighters, 2 former cops, 2 former city administrators, 1 former city councilman, 1 current city paramedic, 1 former HR director, and 1 member who is currently married to the
James Ryan. We like to name names.
We do like to name that. That would be the Majakis that's on the board also. The kings.
One of our callers that call in all the time, Gary from Factoryville, always comes in and makes sure that remind us that if we're going to say something, name the names if we can. Just like
I wanted to give
officials.
people a reason to pick up the Independent Gazette, Lou. I didn't want to just throw out all these names for them. I just wanted to tie it in that there isn't one person on the board employed by this credit union that does not have a direct tie to City Hall. So for an independent, unrelated credit union that is not related to city government, it sure looks related to city government.
Now, when you said Mayor Layton,
yes.
One who really loves the Gazette. When you said that he spoke to the press, he didn't talk to us.
No, he won't talk to us.
In fact, I just wanted to clarify.
We have sent both the mayor, the assistant city administrator, and the spokesperson for the city. We've sent all of them emails several times asking for comment, input, clarify the facts, let us know if we're on or off base. We don't get anything back. Leave phone messages. I visited the mayor's office yesterday, dropped off my card once again, and nothing. Either my phone is broken, my emails don't come to me, or I'm being ignored. And
you're listening to Sanity Check, 888-577-4487. Now, Michael, Frank also made another offer, as I understand, to the DA.
I did. I'm working on another story regarding a city employee that we've been following.
You mean the meter maid?
The meter maid, right.
Meter maid guy.
Parking authority member.
I like the meter maid.
Oh, meter maid? Okay.
Who likes to beat up people?
Well.
Well, likes to rough them up.
He certainly, he just pled guilty, Lou. To roughing up a city resident.
Oh.
Yeah, we first got this story.
The
tough guy. We first got this story when a city resident came to us only because he dropped our name when she was being harassed by him on her front porch.
Let's remind folks. Michael, you remember that? Do you remember when this tough guy, Mr. Meter Maid, starts knocking on the door?
Of your cousin, I believe.
And what happens is
she said, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to contact the press.
Right.
Didn't mention any names. She had never met me or I'd never met her. And she said, if you continue, I'm going to contact the press. He looks right at her and named the title of our next article. He said, who are you going to call? Sorick. So that was appropriately named, that article.
And on the phone, you listened to the conversation of this going back and forth, if I remember a little bit.
Yes.
And so here's this meter maid guy.
Yes.
Right? So we write this story, and once again, let's tie this all together. Why we're doing the newspaper, why, Michael, we started this whole thing is to give people a voice. So what we normally do is now we write this story about this meter maid guy.
Right.
right?
Harassing a city resident.
Harassing a resident, and we go up to City Hall, and of course they won't talk about it. This is,
an HR issue.
An HR issue, the normal stuff. So as usual, we take our little paper, and we're walking around town, flipping the paper onto the steps of people looking
a federal agent.
And now it lands on the doorstep of a federal agent who calls and reads our newspaper and says,
"Whoa, you missed a case here. He harassed someone else."
You did. Okay, listen. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's in the family, and we got X on the phone. We got all kinds of stuff going on. So stay with us. You're listening to Sanity Check on 94.3 FM The Talker.
Tea Party Mike, Libertarian Lou. They're Sanity Check. Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM The Talker.
Good morning, and it's time for the Council Feud for the Wilkes-Barre City Council. And this is how we pass resolutions in Wilkes-Barre. We interviewed the top 10 crooked bribers. We interviewed 100 crooked bribers. The top 10 resolutions are on the agenda this morning. And, of course, the bobbleheads all sit there going, good answer, good answer.
That's it. So, if people want to see the City Council Family Feud, when is that? That's Thursday coming up. And they're going to get to see you, the host, Frank. You can be there. You will be there as always. Right?
As always, cheering them on.
No kissing women, Frank.
Yeah, no speaking at City Council if you're not there 5 minutes early. You must be there to pre-register. So remember that. Your constitutional rights do not apply in the small island nation of Wilkes-Barre.
You're listening to the Sanity Check, 888-577-4487. Hey, Michael, you think we've had too much coffee this morning or what? What do you think?
Well, as I'm thinking about this, and I want to let people aware of why the meter maid attacked this particular individual.
Ooh, yes.
Because she was your cousin.
Well, I think it's important. It's very important because I believe there was, there was political reasons that this particular individual didn't happen to go along with what she previously went along with. There was a connection with me, which, certainly I've been known to stir the pot. And I believe this was a case of pure intimidation. Look, you either get in line or we're going to make your life hell. And I think that's important for our listeners to know because this is typical government being in the harassment role, trying to make sure that all of their good little citizens go step right in line with everybody, with the mayor on down, Lou. So I think it's important that our listeners know that.
That is important. And let me also... two things. Once again, that's why it's so important to have a press that will continue and dig constantly into these things, because if we have a bought and paid for press, and certainly X is going to talk about some of this when he comes on at the half hour here, but at the end of the day, here is an individual knocking on this woman's door. Once again, who knows how many times all this stuff happens. So what happened here was, he says, why are you calling 911? And she happens to say, I'm not calling 911. He says, you're a liar, right, because here's this guy now who is now a fired counselor or whatever else. He's some kind of...
human lie detector, he told her. I can see when people are lying to me. Well, I thought he was in the best job in the world. He already works for City Hall. Just head on down to the mayor's office, because I can see when he's lying too. His lips are moving.
So here we get a tip from a federal officer saying, wait a minute now, hey, Gazette guys, you guys are doing great work. This paper landed on my doorstep. I don't even know where you came from, but that's okay. Here it lands on
federal agent you're talking about.
Well, right. So now you need to dig a little bit deeper, because there's some kind of pending some kind of pending charges out there that seem to have disappeared. No, that would not happen in Wilkes-Barre.
No. Well, a Wilkes-Barre police officer did charge this gentleman prior to him getting his job at City Hall. They charged him with harassing and assaulting another city resident. And this other city resident press charges against him. The charges made it over to the local magistrate. The magistrate...
Cronauer, that was his name,
Rick Cronauer recused himself, right, because Magistrate Cronauer knew the gentleman.
Right.
And said, okay, I have to recuse myself. From that recusal, it was sent back to court administration to be reassigned to another magistrate. It seemed to disappear and die.
I still remember that day. I go up there, we're asking about this case, and I remember the woman saying, this never happened before. I don't know how this ever happened. A year down the road, this case has now went into the ether.
You're right. It just seemed to go into limbo.
Well, see, what she meant to say was, this never happened before that somebody caught on. That's what she meant.
Bingo! That's exactly right. Michael, you got that. You got it right there.
Right.
So the long and the short of it is...
In fact, his attorney, now when the case finally did make it to Judge Malice over in Plains, and Judge Malice heard the case, and his attorney tried arguing the fact that it was stale dated, and they didn't timely prosecute the case, so it should be dismissed. And Judge Malice refused, and she said that it was through no fault of the victim or the district attorney that it wasn't reassigned.
Nah, no fault at all. But we'll just let it. The long and the short of it is he has admitted guilt,
accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office and pled guilty for fine and criminal records. So,
and you wanted to nail that down a little bit further, that's where you went to the DA for the last 3 days?
For the last 3 days, I've been calling and visiting the district attorney's office, asking for a comment, asking, can you confirm the charges and what
and the plea.
Right. We wanted to get a little more detail as to what the details of the plea entailed. Did he qualify for any type of first offenders where this will disappear off his record, or does it remain on his record? Those types of questions. And of course, we can't get any answers. Nobody will call us back.
And I believe that's where you came and you made the offer of a front page story once again for the Gazette.
With a nice headline that says, DA's office refuses to talk to Gazette.
Well, there's a surprise. So, Michael, there you go. And once again, listen, if you want to get involved with what we're doing, we are making a difference. We know we're making a difference. We know that the stories that we're going to talk about even later on in the show, what's going on in our courts, the same thing. The exact same thing that we saw years ago with lag towing is the same thing that's happening now. There's a parallel right now, Michael, with what's happening in our courts, not only in Lackawanna, Luzerne, but around the country. And as we continue to start bringing this up, we're not going to let this go. I got all kinds of stories I could tell folks, and it could go on for hours about the way I've already been treated in the courts themselves. Right. And being told to leave, and they're going to escort me out of the building for showing up. And guess what? It ain't going to work.
Well, I've seen a lot of recusals in a recent case just because you showed up, Lou.
There was 3 recusals. The judge, the guardian ad litem, the lawyer itself has recused themselves within 1 month. All of a sudden, these people, and that's one of the things, Michael, that we're finding. There's an awful lot of shell and P games that are moving.
Now, prior to you showing up, you spoke with a lot of victims, Lou, and folks involved in these types of cases. Prior to you showing up to that one in the recusals, how many recusals had happened prior to you showing up? Any heard of any?
Listen, here's some of the things, and certainly some of the things that we need to start tying in. Once again, nibbling around the case, nibbling around the edges. But let's just look at some of this stuff, Michael. And just take, and Bob Butts talks about this all the time, just normal greed, just human nature. You have the greed, and then of course you could throw the power into it. But let's just say, for an example, the individual that's responsible for sending people to get drug tests, that their mother would own the drug testing company, or the judge perhaps that sends people to house arrest.
Right.
That maybe his sister owns the monitoring company. Do you think there's any possibility of any wrongdoing there?
No, it's all independent. It's not related, Lou.
It's all independent there. So, Michael, here, once again, we're looking at what's going on and why it's important to get involved. You know what? I'm going to say it. Get involved with what we're doing, because this is how we're going to make changes in our communities. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very interesting, Lou, and I think of all the standards that, just for example, I'll throw my brother out there who's a real estate broker, and I had to have some appraisals done on a property or two, and he refused to help me. He said, that's conflict of interest. I can't possibly do that. And so this is the way government is supposed to work, Lou and Frank. This is the way they're supposed to do things, but they live on a different standard. You spoke earlier, Lou, about how they're digging deeper and deeper, and I suspect as they dig deeper and deeper that this thing goes up higher and higher. And this is, I'm eagerly biting at the bit here, wondering when some heads are going to roll, but I guess we have to be patient. And Lou, and I'm glad to hear, Lou, that you're confident in the FBI's ability to do independent studies and not be influenced by some of these entities. I hope that's true. Because of the fact that you always have to watch a watchful eye, but knowing that Independent Gazette is on top of this, I think that, and this is why independent media once again is important, that there are going to have to be people answering the questions eventually, Lou. So this is what we have to understand, why these things are coming out and why we need to have this throughout the nation. In my meeting with Sean Quinn, the director for the local FBI here, what he said to me, and he said, please quote this, a corruption by anybody, by any official, by any organization, is my sworn enemy and is the sworn enemy of our local FBI. I'm going to take him on the word, his word for that. Michael, one of the things that, I want to bring up, and there's so many different things here, these judges and these lawyers and all with the kids for cash, the cars for cash that we're having now, that Mark Robbins and Sorick have stayed on, really from day one. And we have to give some kudos even to ourselves. We were there. We were the first one. There was nobody else that went with Robbins to those first hearings except for the Independent Gazette. Right. And these gazettes, once again, landing on steps, which we're doing again now in Scranton, going into the Poconos. But just think of this. These judges and these lawyers and all these intellectuals, there's only a couple things that are happening here. Either they're ignorant or incompetent. Let's call it the way it is. Or they are complicit in breaking the law, because not reporting crimes is breaking the law. That's what Miracle is going to be sentenced for here. So only one of two things is happening. You could either look at these things, and that's what we're going to start asking the FBI and people that can prosecute. Either you're complicit or you are just plumb ignorant and ignorant. And if you want to think that these judges and lawyers and everybody else, all these people that are court appointed, are sitting in those things, or they're either ignorant or incompetent, or they're just closing their eyes. And I think we all know.
Yeah, they're not incompetent, Lou. These are people who are ignorant by choice, because these are people that should know better. They're members of the bar in good standing. They absolutely should know better.
A couple of other things. Go ahead, Michael. Real
quick, Frank, and I just got back to the board of the credit union. And as you were mentioning the names, and I just have a question for you. You're talking about firefighters, police officers, paramedics. Do these folks all have MBAs? Because I don't see the qualifications for board members to be sitting there when they have absolutely no experience in handling your money.
Michael, you just threw us another softball, which is certainly, and we have some calls waiting, and I want to take them, but I also want to get some things. But when I say by throwing a softball, that's another thing that we're looking at. A lot of these individuals that are making decisions for the courts, supposedly, we're getting all kinds of information that are not really qualified to make the decisions that they're supposed to be. But I want to get something on the record, Michael, because certainly what's been said to me, people have said, be careful. I want this on the record. I don't do drugs, okay? I don't traffic drugs, all right? I am not a gun runner, and I don't drink and drive, okay? So as far as I know, I'm not some kind of rat. I'm not growing, all of a sudden have some new hankering for cheese or growing a tail. I just want it out there that if all of a sudden, Michael, I'm accused of drugs in my car, they're not my drugs. I just wanted that on the record. Let's take a call. I think we got Ron from Northampton. Good morning.
Lou, Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Boy, the Coffee Express.
It is. I was really looking forward to this show today. It was like, oh my God, we got Frank coming in, we got X, we got the new paper coming out. Actually, I think looking at the new paper, you have John DiLiberto has a whole article on your call here, and so you're going to be front and center in one of our the Wilkes-Barre paper coming out. But you only got a minute or two, so make it worth your while. Or what you got? got going?
I'm chiming in on double dipping. You've been double sipping on coffee, but the double dipping, the practice, and this is largely in Department of Public Welfare, Human Services, but it applies, gentlemen, to what you've been talking about, where an employee of government works for a provider agency where there's a relationship, a funding relationship to that agency, so that whatever the matter being referred is also controlled by the original source. And this goes on specifically, and Pennsylvania is somewhat of a dinosauric example of this because so many states have outlawed it. And there's a really good representative, and it just shows you it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. Democratic State Rep Tom Calderone, if I spell that right or say that right, in Berks County, has tried to introduce legislation and that there's no double dipping in Pennsylvania, especially by these so-called social service workers with county governments. But it was defeated by their union. And I could give specific testimony that within our family, a social worker that was involved in a wrongful apprehension of a family member assigned herself as the supposed independent overseer of visits with a provider agency where she double dips in the evening.
It's so prevalent throughout everything that we're looking at, and that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about here with this rally coming up, Ron, and everything else, is that, you know what, people have asked for proof. Well, people are going to come forward, and we have to give, you know what, it's going to take a lot of bravery for a lot of these folks to come forward because Ron, you know as well as anybody else, there's an awful lot of intimidation. There's an awful lot, especially when you have families and your children in the balance. Ron, thanks for calling. We need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to X, and we'll just keep rolling. You're listening to Sanity Check on 94.3 FM, The Talker.
94.3 FM, The Talker.
Don't listen to a word I say. The screams all sound the same.
We're back. We are back. And as we always say, don't listen to a word we say. Do your own research. And before I bring X on, Michael, I want to doing a little research last night, and certainly maybe the most libertarian candidate for president ever, and they had some interesting stuff to say, and I just want to say this to suggest. And this is his quote, okay? To suggest that the conservative philosophy is out of date is akin that the Golden Rule or the Ten Commandments or Aristotle's politics are out to date. He went on to say, he says, I have little interest in streamlining government or making it more efficient, for I mean to reduce its size. I do not undertake to promote welfare, for I propose to extend freedom. My aim is not to pass laws, but to repeal them. It is not to inaugurate the new programs, but to cancel old ones that does violence to the Constitution, or that have failed their purpose, or that impose on the people an unwarranted financial burden. I will not attempt to discover whether legislation is needed before I have first determined whether it is constitutionally permissible. And if I should later be attacked for neglecting my constituents' interests, I shall reply that I was informed that the main interest is liberty, and in that cause I am doing the very best I can. And here's the thing. I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also, stuff that we're talking about right now, let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. Barry Goldwater. You know, I have to do some more research on this guy, Michael, but I got to tell you, you know what? If we're going to sit by, if we're going to allow, if we're not going to ask the tough questions, if we're just going to, and this is once again tying everything in that we've been talking about. And X is going to talk about the false flags and why it's so important to have a free and independent press, and not a press that's just going to sit there and ask the tough questions. You know what? If any of any of the candidates that are running are going to come on this show, we're going to ask them the tough questions. Are you going to vote for Boehner? Are you going to overturn the Affordable Care Act? We want those questions. We want those answers. We don't want the two-step and the three-card Monty. If we have somebody on this show and we talked about Baker, are you going to continue to get smuckered by your own party and not stand up for the Constitution? And on that segue, good morning, Mr. X.
Morning, gentlemen. I've been curiously following a lot of the events that have been taking place over the last week and a half, because about a week and a half ago, you probably have seen through the mainstream media that the country of Turkey shut down YouTube and Twitter accounts, as well as looking into other sites on the web to try to stop a audio leak of high-level Turkish government officials plotting to stage a false flag event by attacking one of their holy sites and possibly launching missiles from Syrian territory into Turkey so that they would have a justification for meddling in the Syrian civil war.
Now, just to cut in here a little bit, I want to let our listeners know that that article, and you wrote a whole article as you usually do, will be appearing in the press Monday, and it is Turkey plans false flag war with Syria. This is a great article, X, as always. But go ahead. I digress.
The key that we want to get from this, I mean, not only is it the fact that a NATO member, okay, now remember, under the NATO Charter, Section 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. So now this would give the United States some sort of a justification, if this went through, that now we have to help and support Turkey because they're being attacked by Syria, which in fact is a lie.
You know,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The key we want to get from this, though, is I put multiple quotes from all of the different news sources that covered the shutting down of the Twitter and the YouTube accounts.
It was great. I got them
one
here.
Of them,
yeah.
Every one of them do not tell you why the government wanted to shut it down.
You have just looking at some of the articles, and certainly I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you say deliberately planning to fool not just its citizens, but also the world community at large. The other egregious omission is blaming of the false attack on the usual scapegoat, Al-Qaeda. Additionally, the disturbing real possibility that the United States has full knowledge of this intent and may even be supportive of such tactics is not something honest journalists accidentally forget to include. This is blatant media censorship. Last week we were at the YAL convention, the Young Americans for Liberty convention, and just before I went on, Ron Paul did a 45-minute clip there. He was on Skype there, and he led. Just before I spoke, you throw up a softball. He said 99.9% of the media today is slanted. And X, I think that's where you're going with this.
Yeah, and it's not just slanted too. It's the blatant disregard for the respect of the American public that they either consciously, I believe on a conscious level, believe that, well, we don't need to tell you that much of this story. That would muddle the idea. When you hear about the Russia and the Ukrainian situation, again, you're not getting the full story. The United States was backing and planning who they wanted to take over in the Ukraine. Now, look, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that Russia and Putin are good guys, but the idea that somehow the Ukrainians are good guys, are good guys, that's where the mistake comes in. When we had the Georgian uprising a few years ago, what people don't understand is that the materials and equipment and the training of all of these uprisings was actually done by the United States.
Well, you have
this is dragging the United States, and this is trying to fool the public. It's always a good guy, bad guy. Blame it on Al Qaeda. Whoever that you can use as the enemy. Because if you say the word Al Qaeda, it's so muddied that there's no way that the American public can really hash through it. And then what do? You find out the Al Qaeda operatives now we're the ones arming them in a place like Syria. So now they're running around. The group we're giving a support to cuts people's heads off, throws them off buildings, and chops their arms.
And you have in your article, the solution to today's problems involve more sunlight and less darkness. And once again, segueing into what we're doing, nothing changes until we have a free and independent press and we have free and equal elections. And for those folks that are not standing up for this, for those that are not, they have to start being classified as our enemy, or at least those that are not supporting the Constitution and our causes. And just by blindly going in and pulling a lever for people that say this is what they stand for, and yet they don't stand for nothing except for rhetoric, is not helping any of us.
No, and the danger that we have, again, is when the American public is told that they should follow the mantra, be a good citizen and go vote. How do you vote on an issue or for a person if you know nothing about what's really going on? I mean, again, if I was going to put out legislation into Congress right now, I would call it puppy dogs, unicorns, and rainbows legislation, because who could be against puppy dogs, unicorns, and rainbows?
Right.
But hidden within that is going to be forms of political poison that will undermine the liberty of every person within my voice.
And that's why you have to have a bulldog of a press. That was the whole idea. We're not your friends. We're not Leighton's friends. I mean, if we're going to be their friends, then we might as well not, we might as well not be in this business at all. If we're going to be everybody's friends, if we're going to, have interviews with people and just ask them all the puff questions all the time and not ask the questions that we need to be asking and finding out where they actually stand on the issues that matter to us and to them, then, we're not doing our job.
There's a reason we don't get the calls back, Lou. That's the reason right there.
And that's fine. And we don't mind not getting calls back because you know what? We're going to print what we think they're thinking.
Right.
But we'll give them an opportunity.
And that's the scary part, guys, is the fact that, look, we're not talking about something minor here. We're talking about the fact that the United States could falsely be drawn into a war, for crying out loud. And the question that is, if you listen to the tapes, and I encourage everybody to follow the links that I have in the article and see for themselves, if you listen to the transcript of the translations of what they're talking about, it implies from what they're discussing that the U.S., through John Kerry, has full knowledge of them planning to do this. Okay? So this means our government might actually be encouraging the Syrians to do something to make it easier, because remember, we were going to have a vote on the Syrian intervention, and they didn't do it because the American public, when they found out about it, went crazy. Both Republicans and Democrats joined together, except against all of these authoritarians, to try to stop this.
The John McCains of the world. You have, these are the words used to describe why, from a few establishment news sources, Reuters describes the contents of the leak as discussing possible military operations in Syria. Fox Business refers it to voice recordings discussing Syria. And you go on, and that's why this is so important. And we encourage folks, once again, if you're not getting the paper, help us out, subscribe to what we're doing. I mean, it's really amazing for what you're picking up the Scranton Times for a couple times a month on Sundays, you could help us continue to move forward and doing the work that we're doing. And I don't mind asking folks, right now we have an Indiegogo drive to go to print into the Poconos. We're there now digitally. We want to be there. We want to be there in print. We need help. And when I say we need help, we're offering some great stuff, man. I mean, if you're a business person, there's ad opportunities that you're in print in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Poconos. Nobody will give you the value for your advertising dollars as we do. X, go ahead, finish up, because then we're going to take a break and we're going to come back. We have to talk about this upcoming rally.
Hey, I'm just going to promise you that I'm always going to try to be bringing to the show news about sources and things that you will not hear elsewhere. Because the problem is, it's what's not talked about that really is the problem.
There you go. So, X, thanks for joining us. We will talk to you next week, and we encourage folks to check out your article, which will be online by Monday, I suspect, at the Independent Gazette and Muckraker News and all our different sites. You're listening to 94.3 FM The Talker. This is Sanity Check. We'll be back.
3 FM The Talker.
So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was.
So wake me up.
Wake me up, Lou.
to tell you who's going to wake us up. We got a rally coming up, and the organizers, Tara's going to wake us up, and Patricia's going to wake us up, and Michelle and Vicky. Man, I got to tell you, man, they're planning this rally, the Protecting Families rally, and you don't want to come to this rally unless you can handle the truth, and that's the thing. And this is going to be unbelievable. We're going to be talking about what's going on in our courts, and not just here locally, but from around the country. And you know what? That goes for the stinking media too. If they want to come, they have to be able to handle the truth and also be able to print the truth, because there's going to be things that are going to be said at this rally that a lot of folks are not. It's going to raise some eyebrows. So, anyway, Michael, we got the permits. The permits were secured this past week. It'll be held in Scranton. We have Jesse Epps, I know, is coming up. Once again, we're just assisting. We're going to be one of the sponsors, but certainly we got some help from folks that what we've done in the past, really, from the Restoring Freedoms. Jesse Epps, who was just recently inducted into the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. He is going to be one of the speakers, just talking about justice in general. You know, Mike, just doing some other research here, I was looking at John Locke, because there was a quote that came to me: whenever law ends, tyranny begins. Folks, I got to tell you right now, the laws in this country have, real justice, seems to me, the more we're digging into this, has ended. And we're going to encourage the other press, other folks, people that want to just come involved, get involved with this rally, which is going to be April 26th on the square in Scranton. And what this is all about is really, it's going to be a family gathering, Michael. There's certainly going to be face painting, live music. If you remember O.G. Law and folks, when we were down in Philadelphia, Michael, he's been on. They have a great live music band. It's OG Law, God's Love at Work, and they're from Philadelphia. They're going to be performing live. And then also what's going to be happening is a lot of these people that have been coming forward to us, people that are brave, and we didn't play that song today, but it will certainly be played at the rally. We have to give a lot of credit to these individuals that are coming forward, because nothing is more important to people than their families, their kids, their grandkids, and to weigh those two things in the balance. Do you go get your drug test? Do you go broke? Do you do whatever you have to do to try to visit your children? And that's and if you speak out, the gag orders. We have another great piece that's going to be in the Independent Gazette about gag orders, Michael, about how the judges and the lawyers throw these gag orders out. Is it to protect the case, or is it really to protect them, Michael?
Well, no, Lou, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about, the only way we can secure our liberty, Lou, is through our actions. If we depend on government to do that, if we depend on the courts to do that, we can see the only thing that keeps government and courts accountable are we, the people. And we, the people, need to get up and realize that and be part of this movement, because we are losing our nation to tyranny, Lou, and you're absolutely right. And this started over 200 and some years ago. You look at the issues they had. I believe our issues are even much worse than that. But, we have a voice. We have a media right in Scranton, Pennsylvania, that will print the voice. We've got internet. We've got so many opportunities and tools to make government and these courts accountable. And they are fearful of us, Lou. You have demonstrated that through showing up at the courtrooms, for people recusing themselves. We do have the power to make the change, and we always need to remember that, Lou.
And I give so much credit for individuals that are coming forward, because I got to tell you, it is scary, Michael. And the intimidation factor, whether it's for businesses, whether it's for individuals, but. I got to say, man, when your kids are in the balance, or grandkids in the balance, boy, that is really tough.
Yeah, and you'll do anything to be able to see your children, to be able to be with your children. And when the courts are taking these children away from parents, for whatever reason. In some of these cases, we're finding out that they'll remove a child from a parent for one reason and then leave a child with an abusive parent for another reason. And it's disheartening.
So much of it
disgusting.
has to look like there's money involved. I know one of the speakers that'll be at this rally, her child was taken at 3 days old, for goodness sakes, because she was on pain and she was on morphine, and they said she wasn't paying enough attention to I mean, I could go on and on and on, and certainly you could look at some of the videos, Michael, that we've been posting, because we're starting to do more interviews with individuals from across the board. But once again, we're asking and letting people know, and this is one of the things that we're doing, is we want to promote this rally as a family rally. There's going to be the food trucks there. We don't want this to be a downer and a bummer. But what we want to have happen, and I know the women that are organizing this rally, they don't want the same thing. They just want to be able to listen. This is what's happening. How do we change it? But then we have to have the wherewithal to change it. Once again, tying this all in together, then we need legislators that are willing to do or go down to Harrisburg and put the laws in place, fight their leadership, and say, no, this is what we need. We need cameras in the courtroom to protect our children, not to protect the stupid judges.
And you're absolutely right. And there's such a double standard. And I think Frank was kind of alluding to that. There's different rules for different folks. I can remember really quick, years ago, my brother was involved in watching a parent whack his kid around during a basketball thing. My brother was involved in coaching, and that all came, in front of the police officer, et cetera. But this particular man was very politically connected. So he walked away with his kid.
Yep.
Now, that's not right, because here's an obvious abuse to the child, but because he had a name, he walked away. And yet the reverse happens. Because people don't have influence, because they don't have money, they lose their children for much less offense than this son of a gun did that particular day.
Exactly, Michael. And what we're seeing, the stories that are coming into the Gazette, and some of them we've looked at, and I always like to play devil's advocate, and I'm asking, well, do these people have a criminal background? Did they fail drug tests? Like, what reasons did we find? We're not finding any reasons. We're running their names through the Pennsylvania Unified Justice System. We're not finding criminal records in some cases. We're not finding that they failed a drug test. So what motivation did the courts have to take their
mom
their
owns the drug testing company, perhaps.
Well, that's it. Or dad was a predominant lawyer or politically connected, so he got full custody and mom got nothing. She doesn't even get visitation because she didn't have the means. She ended up in the divorce penniless and with working just a minimum wage job, so she doesn't even get to see her kids, and she's working as hard as she can to pay for these ridiculous drug tests one after another that haven't turned up anything. So
once again, we say this is the fastest hour in radio. Boy, we're down to the last 2 minutes, Mike. But once again, when we're tying this all together, we have to be able to have a press that's willing to print. But now, we're coming into the legislative elections. We're going to need people that are going to stand up. We talk about Smucker. And that's important. And it's just not about just getting on the ballot. First of all, it should be constitutional. But besides all those things, I mean, when we look at people that are the chairman of these legislative bodies, we have a Greenleaf down there who heads up the judiciary. When 80% of his money comes from the Bar Association, who is he really representing? Is he representing the Bar Association? But we're going to need people that are going to be elected, hopefully, to the legislature that'll say, wait a minute, I don't care if you're part of my party. You're doing the wrong thing.
Yep, absolutely, Lou. And this is all about electing folks who are accountable to us, not to a particular party.
So mark that date down, April 26th. We're on the square right in Scranton. It's set for noon to 3. Certainly, there's an hour before and after. Folks will be there. If you want to get involved, if you have a table, we want people to get involved. I know that. Michael, we're done.
Hey, God bless all.
God bless everybody. We'll see you next week. Sanity check.